Hey everyone, welcome to Beyond. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. Today we have an inspirational guest, high-performing guest for sure. Hannah Finchep is a 23-year-old professional mountain biker and triathlete. She's a 5 times collegiate mountain bike national champion, a 2 times triathlon amateur female world champion, a certified athletic trainer, a certified USA cycling coach, and currently she's competing for a spot on the USA's Olympic women's mountain biking team for the Olympics in Tokyo. Hannah, welcome.
Great to be here.
Awesome. Wow. What I guess I wouldn't say what an intro. I maybe flubbed some of those words, but I'll tell you what an inspirational story that you're pursuing at such a young age. So if you could help the audience sort of take us back, can you give us a quick 60-second summary of the path you took to get to where you're at today?
Yeah, I started racing endurance sports at 9 years old in the sport of triathlon, and I raced triathlon everything from draft legal to non-draft legal to to off-road triathlon from the ages of 9 to 19. And in the training for that, I did, some mountain bike races here and there, and that was really, training focused. But at the age of 19, the team that I was on at the time was transitioning their focus from triathlon to mountain biking. They said, "You're so young, would you like to make this transition with us and become a full-time mountain biker?" And it was really an opportunity that was too good to turn down. And so I gambled on myself. I went all in, and here I am. I'm 25 years old now. And I wouldn't change a thing. I absolutely love it. And I'm so honored and still a little bit shocked that I'm in the position I'm in to be competing for a spot on the Olympic team.
Well, it really speaks to your determination, your focus, your hard work. And I like what you had to say, you bet on yourself. And I think that's a very powerful lesson. Sometimes a lot of people have fear, doubt, insecurity, uncertainty. And here you're saying, you know what, maybe you had all those as part of a construct at certain points along your progression, but you bet on yourself, you believed in yourself, and more importantly, you put the work in. So the question then is, where did your passion at 9 years of age start? I mean, to get into triathletes and riding bikes, 9 years of age, where did that come from?
Yeah, I think for me, the love of sport has always been the challenge. It's been the ability to push myself. And I really do believe that this is something that God has gifted me with the ability to do. And so that has always really driven me and provided me kind of that why behind what I do. But I remember when I was 10 years old reading a race description for a running race that said, this is a scramble, get from one arrow to the next as fast as possible. And it just sounded like the most adventurous, exciting, thrilling thing. And I think that has continued to drive me. It's like how further, faster, farther, how much can I push myself? And as a kid, just running a mile down the block is like thrilling, right? Because you're all alone, you're out there. And so it's certainly progressed, but I think just challenging myself, finding that freedom, finding the ability that I didn't know that I had has always been a huge driving force for me.
So in high school, I read where you were a 2-time high school state champion. What did it feel like to put the work in and then get those kinds of results?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, that's always been, that's hugely rewarding, right? I think that's the bottom line. But I think for me, a lot of the reward has always been in the process and seeing the improvement within myself. And, that's something that I think throughout my career, I've realized more and more, because maybe as a younger athlete, a lot of the reward came in victories and standing on podiums and medals and all of those things, and high school state championships. And then in triathlon, I became world champion at one point. And then I transitioned to professional mountain biking. And all of a sudden I was 30th, I was 20th, I was, much, much further back. And I think a lot of people always ask me during that time in my life, are you okay with this? How are you doing? It must be hard to be further back after having been on the podium. And I never viewed it that way, because to me, I was 30th, then I was 25th, I was 25th, then I was 20th, I was 20th, then I was 15th. And that constant progression felt like such a victory to me that I almost felt blinded to the fact that it wasn't quote unquote success that other people were used to seeing. And now that I've reached the point where I am fighting for podiums again, it's funny to look back and realize that I feel that same sort of satisfaction now standing on the podium as I did then, being, just finding improvement.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, speaking of which, in college, you became a 5 times collegiate mountain bike champion. And we all know in college athletics, right? It's a pyramid. You go from high school and maybe you dominate. And then when you get to college, the competition gets a lot more stiff. Perhaps people are vying for scholarships, whatnot. So what did it take to become a 5 time champion? You mentioned the progression, but
Mhm.
specifically, what did it take when you came into that situation and you're vying for top spots in the podium? As compared to high school, what did it take in your mind to become that 5 time champion?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, I skipped the mountain bike national championship my freshman year because I was still focused on triathlon. So I didn't even compete in that national championship freshman year. And then sophomore year is when I won my first collegiate mountain bike national championship in cross country. And that was the first time I saw myself as a mountain biker. So I really hope I never forget that moment, because that was a victory that came by surprise. I think I was an underdog going into that race. I wasn't the one who was expected, but I was putting it all out there and I crossed the line in first. And that was a moment where, I was kind of at that point in my life on the edge of deciding, okay, do I want to be a mountain biker? Do I want to stay with triathlon? What do I want to do? And that victory is like, okay, maybe this is possible. Maybe this is something I'm really good at. And then as I transitioned into my junior year, I made that full commitment into mountain biking, really went all in, trained more than I ever had before. And I won the short track, the cross country, and the cyclocross national championship my junior year. And I think that was something that in that time of my life I really needed, because it was a huge confidence boost. It was a huge reward for the decision that I made. And it really propelled me forward at that time in my life, seeing that, okay, I am good at this, because I still needed that affirmation.
Yeah.
And, let's see where this can go.
It's fascinating. There's so many, you could write a book, and I know you're an author and we'll talk about that, but you could write a book on what you just said, because I think there's a lot of times people go through life and maybe they're not an athlete, but they're looking at something they're thinking about and they're wondering the same thing. Am I good enough? Can I compete? Can I be successful? And it's funny because you were super successful early on in your life and in high school, no question about it. Yet you have the humility to maybe take yourself out of what you were really successful at that point and then try the unknown at some level, and then start getting feedback and start developing the confidence and maybe the training and everything that went into that. I think it's very instructive, Hannah, that you kind of went through this process, because I think it's very applicable to life, because there's going to be a day someday, maybe you're not competing, but you'll apply it to business or your family life or some other aspect of your life. And I think for anybody listening in the audience, what you're sharing is really powerful, because it's sometimes you got to step into that unknown, into that quote unquote fear, and take it on. And in that process, maybe you don't finish number one, but you're developing confidence in yourself that maybe is applied to some other stage in your life.
Absolutely. And I think, to take it one step further, just for anyone who's listening, imposter syndrome is real and everyone out there experiences it. And I think, as a younger athlete, you look up at these other older athletes or more experienced athletes and you think, man, they really have it together. If only I was this person, if only I was on the podium, if only I had won this race, then I would be there, wherever there is. And every time I've hit that point, I've felt the success, I've felt the joy, don't get me wrong. But you get there and you're like, how did I get here?
Right.
Do I actually deserve to be here? And I think that's great. Like you said, it's humility, it's the excitement, it keeps things fresh. But also, you know, there comes a point where, you do stand around and, like on the Olympic long team, for example, I look around at the other women on this team and I think, wow, what an incredible opportunity to be matched up competing against these women. And you do have to remind yourself, I earned the right to be here. Like, this isn't a mistake. I did it. And I just would encourage everyone out there, those feelings of doubt, those feelings of, why am I here? Do I deserve to be here? That's okay. But remind yourself, hey, if you're here, like, you earned it, you deserve it, and just enjoy it, because that feeling will probably remain with you forever. And it's what you do with that at each level in life that can really shape the outcome.
Boy, that's well said, Hannah. And it's such a young age, such wisdom and insight. And you're absolutely right. I think it's building the foundation of your life where you take on different, challenges and levels of success, meet it. It's going to prepare you for that next big, gnarly thing you can't even foresee today. Right. And I think, kind of going back, what's interesting to me is when you hit the kind of success you have, you could have one of two approaches. You could say, I'm going to just bask in the ego and who I am and what I've accomplished, and as compared to other people, I'm elite. Or you could say, with true humility, I got to grind it every day. I got to work hard every day. And I like that idea of, do I really belong? Because to me, it's just sort of maybe it's reverse psychology. It pushes you even stronger and harder to compete, because you are competing with the best women mountain bikers on the planet Earth. I mean, just put that in perspective, right? So
Yeah.
the fact that you're there, it says to me, hard work does pay off. Clearly you have some skill sets and some genetic talents for sure. But to your credit, you looked at your skill sets and who you are, and you really applied the effort, the discipline, the hard work to get to an endpoint. And to me, that's just completely inspirational.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think, to that point, it's, there's a few different ways you can look at it. One, there is always someone better.
Yeah.
Always. I don't care who you are. If you're a world champion, you were the best on that day.
Right.
And tomorrow there might be someone better. And so, that's a driving factor. And then, even in training, when I'm all alone, I can beat myself. And that's something that I absolutely love about this sport is, on any given day, I can beat myself in a whole myriad of things. It's not just the power profile. It's not just the effort. It's also technical skills and endurance and strength and power and all these different metrics. And so even on days I'm tired, maybe I can beat myself in my ability to corner or something like that. And so it's just always finding that 1%. And if you find enough 1%, wow, that suddenly is a massive improvement.
Yeah, it's nothing like quantitative analysis to get clarity on performance. And it's like I read a book once, 1 degree. 1 degree, and when you're flying off course, you'll never end up in your destination. But 1 degree change in your training or specific aspect of what makes for a successful mountain biker can mean the difference between a silver and a gold.
Absolutely, and it often is.
Yeah. So as you're preparing for races, whether it be college or even now, and you're training, what does a typical day of training look like? Just take the audience through, because you're doing elite stuff. So what does a typical day in the life of Hannah look like when you're training?
Yeah, and it's changed a lot throughout my career. In college, I was a double major. So there were some semesters where I had 24 credit hours. So I was flying by the seat of my pants. And a lot of the times for those days, I was on the bike before 6 a.m. to get in what I needed to do. And that was the time that I know that I could do it. And then I'd go to class, and then I'd do my clinical hours, and then I'd do my homework, and then I'd start it all over again. But as I've graduated and cycling and this and racing becomes, you know, my career and my focus, that has been something that I've really learned and honed in on. Is it's not just about putting in the time, it's about the recovery and all of those other things. So, you know, for me, I train during the most optimal time of the day. During the summer, that's usually earlier morning to beat the heat. And in the winter, it's usually later afternoon to get the warmest time of day. So depending on that, you know, I'm going to wake up. Maybe if I'm riding in the afternoon, I'll do my coaching in the morning because I coach quite a few athletes. I have my own coaching business. And then when it comes time to ride, you know, that is my sole focus. So I'm going to center, you know, my nutrition around it. I'm going to time it out. I'm going to hopefully do some sort of centering practice before I ride, whether it's just, you know, some deep breathing or something like that. I'm going to do my muscle activations, and then I'm going to ride. And, you know, on average, like, sure, maybe I'll have an easy day or something, but usually that ride's going to be somewhere between 2 and 6 hours, which is still a pretty big range. But somewhere between 2 and 6 hours. And then I'm going to get back. I'm going to stretch. I'm going to have my recovery nutrition. I'm going to probably sit in my compression boots. And then, you know, whatever else you need to do as a professional athlete, you know, because you have a lot of sponsor requirements and all of that. So it might be going out and taking some photos, or, you know, working on your bike. You know, maybe you need to refresh some things on your bike. And so it's all those little things that, you know, you really have to get right in order to have super effective training all the time.
Now, do you have somebody working on the bike for you, or is that in your hands totally?
A little bit of both. So my team does have a mechanic, but my team is spread across the United States. So we can't always have that mechanic with us. The mechanic will be at the races, but when I'm at home, I'm on my own. I'm lucky enough, though, that my fiance has worked as a mechanic a lot and is extremely proficient. So I get to have him work on my bike most of the time.
That's fantastic. Well, that's a gift for sure. So as you train yourself or coach others, how important are race simulations? Because you're going to prepare for a race, but how important is it to simulate the race itself?
I think it's really important. You know, for me, I think racing is what we do, right? And so racing for me is where I want to be the fastest. And the best thing, you know, like, there's all this training, you know, I have a degree in exercise science, so I understand the periodization, all of these things. But if you boil it down, the best thing we can do in training is mimic the demands of a race. And what is closer to a race than a race? So for me, I really like to race as much as possible. And I find that as I race throughout the season, I get better and better. I think, you know, controlling the nerves, learning the tactics, all of those things really come to fruition for me as I train more, as I race more. But especially, you know, in those early season races and this last year during the pandemic, where there wasn't a lot of races, that was something I had to create on my own. So I did a lot of race simulations on my own, whether it be, you know, creating power goals that would really mimic a race, or if it was literally making a race course in my backyard and saying, okay, I'm doing 6 laps, you know, here's the goals, and then, you know, racing it and trying to beat it over and over. And that, I think, played a huge role in my training, especially this last year.
I could imagine. And when you think about regular races, do you guys have ways of keeping quantitative statistics on the bike, on the times, on maybe specifics to your technique? Are you able to quantify that so you can go back and look at where you can get areas of improvement?
Yeah, I mean, it can get a little bit tricky with mountain biking since every course is so different. You know, so we really have to be very analytical and break it down a lot, because what we look at mostly as mountain bikers is power. That's the most objective data we have, is wattages. And so on a day-to-day training basis, we're training based on watts. But if a course undulates a lot or something, our overall wattage might be fairly low because we're descending, we're coasting, we're doing maybe only 1 minute hard at a time, and then it's 1 minute on, 1 minute off, 1 minute on, 1 minute off. So it becomes a game of analyzing those numbers and not just saying, what can I hold for an hour, or what can I hold for an hour and a half, but it becomes, well, what's my best 10-second, 30-second, 1 minute, 5 minute, and boiling it and boiling it down or expanding it, depending on how you look at it, of all of these different metrics. And then, beyond that, getting very technical and looking at, that's where it maybe becomes a little more subjective of what tire am I fastest on, but there are certainly studies of rolling resistance. And if you stand on a World Cup course long enough, I'm sure you'll hear someone talking about this tread pattern versus this tread pattern in a lab setting, and which one rolls faster and which one's going to corner better. And it can get extremely technical out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors for sure, and certainly to getting to the win. So when you think about mountain biking, what percentage of the time are you actually up in the pedals going up a hill versus flat versus going downhill? Because I've seen a lot of these races. It looks like ones I've seen, it's like speed going downhill, and it's just it looks very exhilarating and exciting for sure. But is it a combination of going uphill and then downhill, or is it mostly downhill?
It's going to be a combination. So I do cross-country racing specifically. So that means there's always going to be up and downhill races. So in a World Cup, we will do laps. So we'll do laps around a course. So there's going to be equal amount of time going up or equal amount of climbing and descending feet-wise, because we're going to have to start and end in the same spot. But the duration that takes might be different on every course. Some courses might have more features where it's going to favor someone who's very technically savvy. And then on other courses, maybe the climbs and descents are so steep that, it takes 5 minutes to get up this climb, but then it's so steep going down that it's only, 1 minute going down. And then that's going to favor a climber or more, power-oriented athlete. And so I think that's something that's really exciting as well, is every course is different, which means that every course is a new opportunity to not only challenge yourself, but, it's not like track or swimming, which were both sports that I did in college as well. And, on the track or in the pool, there's a lot of times where you line up and your PR and the personal best time of the person next to you, and it's like, well, I can be pretty confident in the outcome of this race, just even before we start. But in mountain biking, there are so many elements, and every course is different, that on one course I might be the athlete that will in theory excel the most, and the next week on a totally different course I might find all of my weaknesses exposed. And I think that's really exciting.
That gives you something to work on. So on a race day, what is your typical routine? Now we talked about simulation. Now you're on the day itself. What does your routine look like when you get up?
This is something else too that I've really fine-tuned over the years. And I've found for myself that I get really nervous. And I think that's a good thing to say, because a lot of younger athletes I know, they do get really nervous and they feel like, oh, maybe I shouldn't, or one day I won't be, and it's okay. Those nerves are there to help you. It's your body preparing, it's your mind saying, okay, here we go. And acknowledging that you're about to do something really big. Right. And so, I do get really nervous, and I kind of sit at the peak of what you want, that stress performance curve. If you're not nervous enough, it's not going to help you. If you're too nervous, it's not going to help you. And so a lot of my race day routine is centered around keeping those nerves in check. So I have a really detailed schedule leading up to the race. So I'm going to eat 3 hours before the race, and I always eat the same thing. I eat pancakes for those fast, easy to digest carbohydrates. And that's 3 hours before the race. And then I usually get to the venue about an hour and a half before. I start warming up 1 hour before. I have a set warm up that I do every single time, and I do it before every race, every hard workout. And I do that because when I do the warm up, it's like a signal to my brain, oh, okay, we're doing this warm up. It's a hard day. We're getting ready. And then, I have a checklist of all the things that I want to have, available and ready to me, whether it's, the nutrition, it's the bottles, it's all of those things. Because for me personally, the worst feeling is digging through your bag, trying to find your gloves 10 minutes before you need to be at the start line.
Yeah, your performance stress score will go off the charts, right?
Exactly. Some people thrive in that, but for me, if you walked into my hotel room the night before a race, you would see a huge line of equipment on the floor, everything laid out. And I'm just going to scoop that up and put it into my bag the morning of, but I want to see every single item and know that I'm all set. And some people might call it obsessive. I call it less stress.
Right. So let's go back to performance stress curve. I find it interesting because as you're trying to maximize your performance on a given race day, and I thought what you said was interesting. It's almost like muscle memory for the brain. When you start doing certain things on that day, it triggers the brain to realize, oh, this is going to be a performance day, a harder day. And that routine seems pretty vital. So as you think about the stress performance curve, have you been able to pretty much optimally achieve an optimal sort of balance on that performance stress curve going into the races? And is it really driven by the routine, or there's some days where, you didn't get enough sleep or something happened and you're just not feeling it?
A little bit of both. I think there are always outside factors that weigh in to your mental state on the day of the race. The first race back after this pandemic, I can tell you it was really hard to keep the nerves in check, more so than your typical race day. When something does go wrong, when you do forget something at the hotel, like it, because mistakes happen, we're only human. And so
right.
it does push you over. But I think one of the things that I've learned throughout my career is I know what it feels like to be sitting in that right spot. And so when I feel that stress start to tick over, I can feel that little warning in my brain of, hey, this is not where we want to be. So what do you need to do to get to where you want to be? Whether it's taking a few deep breaths, whether it's asking for help, sometimes that's just what you need. You need to say, I need someone to go get this for me, please, 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 so, I'm lucky enough to be on a team that can and does supply that help. And so it's really, to me, more feeling where you're at and knowing where you need to be and knowing what it takes to adjust to get there.
Right. So a lot of people would view mountain biking as a pretty extreme sport, right? Whether you're going up or extremely down a hill. How could you take the audience through some times where maybe you've had some crashes or wrecks, what that was like, and then what the recovery was like? Because I'm sure there's some injuries involved in this sport because it's rock, it's dirt, it's traction, it's gription, it's a lot of things. So is there like one or two things you look back and you had some pretty tough crashes on the course, and what it was like to sort of rebound from that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like I can take this so many ways because you're right. This is a sport where you're constantly overcoming fear. And part of that is recognizing that, I could get hurt. And it is, an occupational hazard. And one of the things is, I can get hurt on a huge feature, or I can get hurt going really fast through a corner, but at this point in my career, I tend to not get nervous for the corners. I just get nervous for the big features. Right. But the risk is there, regardless. And so it's once again, managing those nerves and it's, and once again, they never go away. The obstacles just get bigger. I used to get nervous for 1 to 2 foot drops, and now it takes 5 or 6 feet to get the butterflies really going. And once again, those nerves, they're good. They're there to help you. They're there to optimize performance. And so, it's really not allowing those nerves to drive you, but just acknowledging them, saying, hey, thanks for being here. Thanks for letting me know that I need to focus a little bit more. I got this. And then kind of pushing them away. And yeah, I think, my first World Cup ever, I got to the course and I was terrified. I rolled up to the first obstacle and I just sat there looking at it, and it took me forever. And I finally did it. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I did it. Okay, let's move on. And I kid you not, like 15 feet later, there's another obstacle.
Right.
And it's just like, are you kidding? Like, how many fears am I going to have to overcome on this course? And that course and that pre-ride in particular, I crossed more than a dozen times.
Wow.
I had blood streaming down my leg, and I'm trying to do these things, and you're overwhelmed. And I laid in bed the night before the race, scared. I was scared to go around the course. And I just sat there visualizing exactly the way I wanted it to go. I wanted to ride it. And that instance, it was great. The next day I went, and that feature that I was the most scared on, I never crashed. I rode it exactly the way I visualized it. And that's an awesome success story. But also there are times when it just doesn't work out. I went to the World Championships in Australia and I rode the course several times, wasn't nervous, was so stoked on how far my skills had come since that day at that first World Cup. And I crashed really, really, really hard. And I ended up in the hospital just a few days before the World Championship. And, I lined up. I was fine. I lined up. I ended up racing. But that race for me was mostly just overcoming the fears. At that point, it was scary. At that point, the stress was way over the curve. It was a little too much to maybe expect a good result, but sometimes just getting back on the bike and reminding yourself, okay, crashes happen, but they don't happen every time. Sometimes that's good enough.
Wow. I can't imagine both of those scenarios, getting back up the next day and making that race happen, because, a good night's sleep is important. If it's playing, that tape's playing in your mind about the crash the day before, you had to come back and dominate. And even in Australia, having a bad outcome in the practice, but still coming back, meeting those fears and those challenges. Again, this is a book. You could unpack what you just said, because I think for the audience listening, this is such a critical concept that, when you get setbacks in life and you get held back, or whatever goes wrong from your worldview perspective in your life, maybe you didn't hit the goals or the blueprint you set for yourself. It's really about tenacity, coming back, sort of a never say die attitude with the right perspective. I think it all comes down to perspective. We can look at, one aspect of a race or a crash or training as the end of the world or the beginning of something beautiful and new. And what you said was also powerful. Like, look, we went from this race, and then in Australia, I saw how my skill set progressed. I'm sure the track was a lot more difficult. And in that, you can take encouragement that I am getting better. Like you said before, like I was at 30 and 20 and 25 and 20. I'm getting better, even though the tracks may be more difficult. So in perspective, relatively speaking, it's actually a victory.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, there are so many times, even in training, you crash on something and it's in your backyard. And when you are okay from the crash, the first thing you think is, oh my gosh, I live next to this feature. I'm going to have to do it again. Right. And being okay with that, and being okay with the fact that it's going to be scary and you're going to have to stand at the top of it and look down and analyze and all of that, but you're going to do it. And, that's something. This last weekend, I was racing at a pretty big race, and there were some very big features, and, we were all kind of working together to overcome those fears. And one of the women rode the big drop, and she said, oh gosh, but I'm still nervous. I did it, but I'm still nervous. And we all looked at each other and said, well, yeah, I'm nervous every time I ride it. And for me, I call that respect. It's respect of the feature. And that's a good thing. And it's just, like I said, it's learning how to make that fear, something that's with you, but not controlling you.
Yeah, well said. So what's it like? Take the audience through what it's like to train to make the 2020 Tokyo Olympics for the USA team. What's that experience like?
Oh, um, it's it's surreal, I guess is a great word. I mean, it's in many ways it's all consuming. I'm hesitant to say that word because I think it can be misconstrued. But it is, and that's something about this job is it's not a 9 to 5. I don't get to check out. Everything I do, I know impacts my ability to train, which impacts my ability to compete, So I think, as you progress through your career, when you're younger, you have a lot more flexibility because if you're training, you're seeing improvement. And as you're seeking that 1%, you discover, oh, wow, if I really focus on sleep, I can train better. And so at a certain point, sleep is a part of my job. Nutrition is a part of my job. All of these things, that are basic human necessities are all of a sudden analyzed to a T, to optimize performance. And I'm really lucky that I have a community around me that loves that pursuit as much as I do. So it doesn't feel like something I have to, isolate myself in order to do. Instead, my community is rallying behind me and we're all, seeking it together. But it's a constant pursuit. And that's something that I love. And it's been really, really exciting. And, for me, I think my goal in this sport has always been to be the best that I can be. And that sounds like such a basic, simple sentence. I want to be the best that I can be. But when you start asking yourself that question before every action you do, is this thing making me the best I can be? It really starts to impact your life. And that's not to say that I don't do normal things, because I think happiness also makes you fast. So sometimes, is seeing friends making me the best I can be? Sometimes, yes, a resounding yes, because it's going to make you happy. And so that's not to say that I'm some super weird person, but yeah, I mean, I have thought about the Olympics, the Olympic qualification race every single day.
By the way, when is that race?
May 16th.
May 16th. And where's this race going to be held?
The Czech Republic.
Wow. So take the audience. This is what's really important to understand and appreciate. How many people in the U.S. vied to make the national team or the Olympic team? What was the pool?
So, I mean, the way that it's structured is anyone with a professional license essentially has a shot, because in order to make the Olympic long team, there is a set of criteria that if you meet that criteria, you make it onto the long team. And there's a few different pathways that you can do that. One of which was a placing at the World Championship. So anyone in the top 30 at the World Championship made the Olympic long team. And that was the criteria that I hit. And at the end, or when they made the announcement of the Olympic long team, there are 6 women in the US who hit one of those criteria on the list. And so now the next step is to look at the next list, which is the Olympic Games criteria. And there are ways to automatically qualify for the Olympics. So one of the women has already done that. Kate Courtney has already secured her spot. And as a US right now, the Team USA for the women has 3 spots in the Olympics. So Kate has one of them, and then there are 2 left and 5 of us currently in contention. So
you went from 30 to 6, and now you're trying to get to the 3.
Well, so what I was saying is anyone in the top 30 at the World Championship would make it. So in theory, if 10 women in the US were in the top 30, then there could be 10 of us on the long team.
Got it.
But only 6 of us met one of the criteria on the list. And now, there's 5 of us who are competing for those final 2 spots. And if someone makes it in the top 8 at this World Cup in May in the Czech Republic, then they will also automatically qualify. And you have to keep in mind at this World Cup in May, it's going to be, all the best female mountain bikers in the entire world. It's not just, US contingent. It's not just North American contingent. It's, people from Australia, from Ukraine, from South Africa, from, you name it, someone is lining up because every country wants to get their Olympic spots.
Right.
And so if you can make it in the top 8, then you automatically qualify for the team. If no one does, then it becomes a discretionary selection, and USA Cycling will create a committee, and that selection committee will look at all 6 of us on the long team, and they will decide who they believe based on statistics, results, everything, the whole kitchen sink, who they think will represent Team USA the best in Tokyo. And you just hope that falls in your favor at that point.
Yeah, 100%. So it's a very fascinating process to go through. And as I'm looking at what you said, there's a lot to unpack there, right? And when we think about the Czech Republic in that race, how many women will be there racing physically? Like, is it 1,000? Is it 2,000? What does that look like?
No, so we all race at the same time. So we all have to fit on the start line. So, and there are criteria as well in order to be allowed to race that race. So it will probably be the best about 80 women mountain bikers in the world lining up for that event.
So so I'm thinking about motocross. You have a starting line in motocross. They have the qualifying races to get to the main race. So you guys have a starting line with mountain bikes, and then you just hit it, and it's just the pedal speed to get to the front?
Yeah, so there's a whole process in which we're ranked, and you're called up according to that ranking. And there is a huge advantage of being on that front line in comparison to towards the back. And it's usually 8 women to a row. So that means if there's 80 of us, there's going to be 10 rows, and we're all going to be packed in. And then they say your start will be anytime in the next 15 seconds. And then the light goes from red to green. And from then it's, it usually in the course, there's going to be a bottleneck somewhere, and it's a mad dash to make it through that bottleneck in a advantageous position.
And how long are these races typically?
90 minutes.
90 minutes. So how many miles is that roughly?
So it's going to be different depending on every course, whether there's a lot of climbing, whether the track is fast or slow, or, if it's really muddy or something like that. But if I had to put a number to it, it's probably going to be, 18 or 20 miles.
Wow. That's interesting. So in that race, when you're halfway through, do you have a sort of a sense of where you're going to land in terms of position, or is it just unknowable because things happen?
A little bit of both. I think, there are, a little bit of both, because a part of me wants to say, oh, because, it's like there are some timeframes that just seem too grand to overcome. If you're in 40th, it's going to be pretty hard to get up to the podium because these are the best women in the world. No one's going to suddenly become so exhausted they cannot continue. But at the same time, never, ever, ever, ever give up, and that has continually been a theme in my career, because it is mountain biking and anything can happen. You know, people
Right.
crash, people get flats, people have mechanicals. And so, you know, I think there's a reasonable amount of space that you can move, but you know, I've been in and watched many races in which the final 5 minutes of the race was, you know, a total shakeup. And so I think, you know, sometimes on these courses, especially when the conditions are really extreme, which in Europe is not even shocking. At least when I've raced there, it seems that rain and mud are quite common. You know, it can wreak havoc, and being smooth and staying upright can sometimes be the main ticket.
Main challenge. So when you get to the Czech Republic, how long will you be there before the actual race? Are you guys there a week and you guys are training and prepping or getting used to the course, or how does that work?
Yeah, so usually being in the US, a lot of the racing happens in Europe. So being in the US, we're kind of traveling back and forth fairly frequently. So we try and condense our trips to be as efficient as possible. So when we go, we'll actually race in Switzerland on May 2nd, and then we'll go and we'll race in Germany on May 9th, and then we'll go and we'll do that race in Czech on May 16th. So we'll kind of have some opener races, some chances to get used to, you know, the terrain, the culture, all of that, and the competition, race against those European racers before that main event.
How exciting. Wow. It's just like, what a life, right? And you know, when you travel to Europe, you're talking about a routine that you're in Utah, but now you're going to go to Europe and it can be really a challenge to that routine, your normal rhythm of things. And so I can see why you want to get there early and just get all the bugs worked out to make sure you're back in that routine and your training. So let me pivot a little bit. Not to be outdone by all the other things you've accomplished. And clearly you're not an underachiever, but you're also got a number of publications I found fascinating. You have The Unconventional Guide to Women's Mountain Biking, How to Fall Off a Mountain Bike Without Getting Hurt, The Best Mountain Bike for a Bad Back. Anyway, so you have all these books. So how did you sort of get into the publication game?
Yeah, so those are just articles. I haven't written any books, but that is something that I certainly could see in my future because writing is a huge passion of mine. So I've kind of, you know, it started out as just writing on my blog, and then I had a few different companies reach out to me, you know, for their stuff. And then I started writing for some smaller websites. And now I've really grown my blog to be a lot bigger. And I also write for Velo News, which is a pretty large online online website for cycling and all kinds of stuff. And so I write for them. And yeah, it's just a passion of mine. I love the written word. It's one of the ways I feel that I can express myself the best. You know, and a lot of these races, you know, people can't always be there. You know, it's great. Like they have great coverage online, but one of the things that I think is amazing is that you can watch a race, or you can even be in a race and perceive it totally differently than the person on the bike. You know, even if I'm competing side by side with someone, I might view it as, oh my gosh, I was on the limit the whole time, I was about to get dropped, and the other person feel the same way. And so I just love kind of exploring that inside look into that, as well as, you know, I have 2 degrees. And so I'm a little bit of a nerd when it comes to the science behind all of racing. And, you know, one of the other things I love about mountain biking is anyone can do it. You don't have to be a professional. You don't, you know, young, old, you know, what, very, very talented, you know, brand new. We all get to do it. It's, you know, and I want to share whatever I can to help more people have an enjoyable experience. And so that's something I write. I write what I call Training Tip Tuesdays. So I write something on my blog every Tuesday that hopefully will help someone with their cycling experience, whether it's how to wash their bike or stretching for cyclists or weight training for cyclists or workouts or something like that. I just really enjoy sharing that part of the sport with people.
Well, that's huge. And so speaking of which, where can people go to learn more about you? Where can they go to see your blog?
Yeah, so my blog is just www.hannahfinchamp.com. And you can also find me through Instagram at Hannah_FinChamp.
Fantastic. Is there anything we have not covered you'd like to share with the audience?
I mean, that's such a hard question. I feel like we really covered it all. I think, you know, I guess just as a general thing, I would want to just express my gratitude to all the people who have helped me in this journey. And there are definitely too many people to name, so I won't even attempt, but, you know, I always just like to add that thank you. If nothing else, to let people know that this isn't just me, you know, it's a whole contingent of other people, including my team, the Orange Seal Off-Road team. And, you know, when I line up to race, I fully recognize the fact that I'm not just representing myself. I'm representing a whole lot of people who have put, you know, as I said, it is an all-encompassing task to chase these goals. And it's not just for me, it's all encompassing for many people who have invested in this process. So a very general, but also very specific thank you to all of those people.
Absolutely. And that's so true. It takes a complete team. And I'll tell you, after talking to you, I'm inspired. I'm encouraged. I love your attitude, your perspective on life at such a young age, what you're taking on in terms of, you know, goals and challenges, highly inspirational. And I hope this is really a blessing, quite frankly, to the people that watch this and review it. And listen, Hannah, we are absolutely pulling for you to get that spot in the Olympic team and watch that progression. So good luck to in that ride in the Czech Republic, and good luck in making the team.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Good having you on the show. Thanks.
Thanks.